The first time a billionaire really heard me, I was on my knees on his marble kitchen floor, picking up pieces of a smashed cinnamon roll and trying not to cry. Not exactly the kind of success story anybody dreams about. But yeah, that's where this starts. My name's Lena Carter. I used to be a live-in maid in one of those glass mansions in Bel Air, the kind where the pool has its own Instagram, and my 6-year-old son Noah lived 3 states away in Alabama, eating dinner without me most nights. The house belonged to a tech guy named Daniel King, but the person who actually controlled my life was his house manager, Claudia. Perfect hair, perfect posture, and a talent for making grown adults feel 2 inches tall. That Christmas Eve, the whole place smelled like cinnamon and butter. I was lining up these fancy cinnamon rolls on silver trays, all glossy and identical, and off to the side sat one little roll that didn't make the cut. A little crooked, icing cracked the kind of thing rich people send back, but regular people would fight over. I stared at it longer than anyone should stare at a pastry, thinking about Noah back home asking if I'd made the macaroni I promised, so we could eat together on video, saving an empty chair at the table for a mom who was polishing someone else's silverware. I knew the rule staff don't take food even if it's headed for the trash, but something in me just gave. I checked the doorway, pulled a clean sandwich bag from my apron, slipped the crooked cinnamon roll inside and tucked it into my pocket, like I was smuggling a tiny piece of Christmas home for my kid. I didn't hear the heels on the tile, just the voice behind me, sharp and low. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" "Lena." And my stomach dropped so fast I thought I might be sick. Claudia was standing there with her arms folded, eyes narrowed like she'd been waiting all night for this, and my hand went straight to my pocket like a guilty teenager. "It was going to be thrown out, ma'am," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I was just going to take it home for my son after my shift." She held out her hand, palm up. "Give it to me. This is a private residence, not a charity kitchen." I put the little bag in her hand, hoping she'd roll her eyes. Tell me not to do it again, maybe toss it in the trash and walk off. Instead, she squeezed it in her fist until the roll flattened, then tore the plastic open and let the pieces fall onto the spotless white floor, crumbs and icing splattering the tile like that was the point. "There," she said, "now it's really trash." And she watched my face the whole time like she was checking if the lesson was sinking in. "Please don't write me up," I heard myself say, my throat tight. It was just one for my boy. I swear I wasn't trying to steal, and I hated how small my voice sounded, how familiar that tone was. She leaned in close enough that I could smell her perfume over the cinnamon and said, "That's what thieves always say, just one. Just one drink, just one ring, just one dessert. You people always have a story, and that little you people hit harder than anything else." I managed, "I'm not a thief, I just miss my son," and before I could catch the words back, she shoved me, not a bump, a real push to my shoulder that sent me sideways into the steel counter, pain shooting down my arm so hard it took my breath. "Get up," she said, already walking away. "Guests are coming. You can cry on your own time and clean up this mess, leaving me on my knees picking up sticky pieces of a dessert my kid was never going to taste." That's the kind of humiliation they don't put in movies, the quiet kind that settles into your bones while you still have a shift to finish, because rent and childcare do not care about your dignity, you know what I mean. I still carried trays that night, still smiled at strangers, while my shoulder throbbed, because walking out wasn't an option when my mom was already stretching every dollar to keep a roof over my boy's head. When the last guest finally left, and the house went heavy and quiet, the other staff headed back to their tiny rooms, and I slipped into the butler's pantry, that little stainless closet off the kitchen, just to stand alone for 5 minutes without anyone snapping orders at me. My old cracked phone buzzed, and it was a video from my mom. I hit play, And there was Noah at our wobbly kitchen table, pajamas with rocket ships, a second plate set at the empty seat beside him. "Mama, look," he said, grinning at the camera. "I saved you a spot. Grandma let me put macaroni there for you. Did you make yours so we can eat together?" Behind him, I could see cheap tinsel taped to the wall, a paper star he'd made at school, the whole scene so ordinary it hurt. He didn't know his mama was standing in a mansion, being called a thief over a broken roll, didn't know my shoulder was swelling under a cheap uniform, didn't know I'd just knelt on a floor that cost more than our whole apartment. I pressed that phone to my chest and finally let the tears come, the quiet, ugly kind you don't have time for on the clock. And I whispered into that empty little pantry, "God, I just want one Christmas meal with my kid. Just one, not on FaceTime, not hiding by the dishwashers. Just me and my boy at the same table, figuring it was headed straight into the void." I was wrong. While I was in there whispering, Daniel was walking down the hallway to his home office, passing that slightly open pantry door. And he heard exactly one sentence, not the cinnamon roll, not the shove, just a tired woman asking the air for one meal with her son. He didn't step in, didn't say anything, didn't magically fire anybody on the spot. This wasn't a movie, but the next morning, when I dragged myself into the staff kitchen at sunrise, shoulder stiff, bracing, for another long day, there was a plain white envelope taped to the fridge with my name on it. Inside was a short note in neat handwriting. "Lena, pack a bag, you're going home today. Driver at 7 a.m. 2 weeks paid leave. Merry Christmas. DK." I read it 3 times, waiting for the punchline, waiting for Claudia to show up and tell me I'd misunderstood, but nobody came. My knees went weak, and I had to grab the counter because 2 weeks paid was not a phrase my life had used around me before. At 7 sharp, a black SUV rolled up to the service entrance. The driver, an older guy named Miguel with kind eyes, tipped his cap and said, "Ms. Carter, ready for the airport," and I actually looked behind me to see if there was another Ms. Carter in the room. On the freeway, he handed me a small gift bag. "From Mr. King," he said. Inside was a brand new phone already set up with my name on the screen and another note. "Lena, I heard you last night. I should have heard you sooner. This doesn't fix what's broken, but maybe it's a start. Go be with your son. We can talk when you're ready. Daniel." Sitting in the back of that car, holding that note, I felt this strange mix of anger and gratitude, part of me furious that it took that moment for anyone to really see me, part of me overwhelmed that he hadn't just kept walking and forgotten what he heard. When I stepped off the plane in Birmingham, that tiny airport felt like the center of the universe. I barely cleared the gate before I heard Mama and saw this blur of a boy running full-speed, socks, sliding curls bouncing, and when Noah crashed into me, arms locked around my neck, the pain in my shoulder disappeared under something bigger. My mom hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack, then pulled back and said, "About time, girl. I was this close to buying a bus ticket and dragging you home myself." And we laughed, but there was truth behind it. Our Christmas that year was small and loud and perfect to me. Dollar store tinsel, cheap ham, boxed cake, my mom fussing over the stove, and Noah climbing in my lap between bites. And for the first time in years, when he said, "Mama, pass the macaroni," I didn't have to say, "I can't, baby, I'm at work." My shoulder kept getting worse, turning deep purple, so my mom bullied me into urgent care, and the doctor took one look and said I had a small fracture, ordered rest, told me no lifting, no scrubbing, no repetitive motion, and I almost laughed in his face because rest and single motherhood don't usually show up in the same sentence. A few days later, while I was standing at my mom's sink staring out at the parking lot, the new phone rang with an unknown number. I answered and heard Lena, "It's Daniel King," and for a second I just stared at the dish soap like it might translate that sentence for me. He asked about Noah, if we'd had a good Christmas, and then he said, "A plane ticket doesn't cover what you've done for my household. I want to talk about something more permanent." He told me they were opening an operations office about half an hour outside Birmingham, coordinating cleaning teams for properties all over, and how they'd already burned through 2 managers with shiny resumes who couldn't tell you the first thing about a real night shift. When I asked who actually keeps my house running, he said your name came up over and over. "I'd like to offer you a supervisor position. Salary, benefits, office hours. You'd be home every night, no more living in." I told him I barely finished high school, that my work history was just a list of other people's addresses that I'd never managed to schedule on a computer. He said, "You don't need a degree to lead people. You need judgment, grit, and the respect of the folks you're leading. You already have all 3. This is not charity, Lena." I didn't say yes right away. Fear sat heavy on my chest because sometimes the thing you've been begging for shows up and looks too big to pick up, you know what I mean. In the end, it was Noah who tipped the scale. He asked, "If you take that job, does that mean you don't have to live in that big house anymore?" And when I told him it means I'd come home every night, he just shrugged and said, "Then you should do it." Fast forward, and I'm walking into this beige office building off the highway. Fluorescent lights buzzing, coffee machine wheezing in the corner. And to me, it might as well have been a palace, because it meant when I clocked out, I went home to my own kid, not to a staff room. They handed me a badge, a login, and a desk with a little nameplate that said Operations Supervisor. Lena Carter and I almost cried just seeing my name printed on something that wasn't a chore chart. The cleaners and drivers started coming to me with real problems: broken vans, impossible schedules, disrespectful clients. And every time I fixed something, every time I stood up for one of them, a piece of that girl on the marble floor stood up with me. A few months in, Daniel called again. "We're launching a mentorship program for single parents and domestic workers who want better jobs," he said. "They don't need another consultant. They need someone who's actually been there. Will you speak?" So I flew back to California, walked through the front door of a foundation building instead of the service entrance of a mansion, and told a room full of women a shorter version of what I'm telling you now. The cinnamon roll, the shove, the whisper, the envelope on the fridge, and how none of it magically fixed my life. It just cracked a door open that I chose to walk through. That talk turned into a pilot. We ended up calling Second Sunrise a place where people like me could get training, community, and a shot at something beyond survival. And then came the twist I never saw coming. About a year later, I was in our Birmingham center going through online applications for a new group cold coffee next to my laptop, clicking through names, and there it was on my screen: Briggs, Claudia. Same careful handwriting, different address under reason for applying. She'd written starting over, willing to learn, willing to volunteer, and my whole body just went cold. My coordinator looked over my shoulder, I told her. "That's the woman who shoved me into a counter over a cinnamon roll," and she just said, "It's your call," then walked away, leaving me alone with my anger. Part of me wanted to hit deny and call it justice, close the tab, and never think about her again. Another part of me thought about what our program was supposed to be, thought about how many chances I'd needed, thought about who I wanted to be now that I finally had some power. In the end, I clicked approve for interview. When Claudia walked into our little conference room at Second Sunrise, she didn't look like the queen of the mansion anymore. No designer suit, no cold armor on her face, just a woman holding her purse too tight. "Ms. Carter," she said, voice smaller than I'd ever heard, "thank you for seeing me." And for a second, both of us understood exactly how much the roles had shifted. The other staff asked their usual questions. Then they turned to me. "Lena, anything you want to ask?" I said the thing that mattered. Yeah, why now? She swallowed hard and said, because I lost that job, and a lot of the life that went with it, and for the first time I had to see what it's like without power. I told myself I was enforcing standards, but really I was scared of ever ending up where you were that night on your knees, and I took that fear out on people. On you. I remember exactly what I did. I think about it more than you'd believe. I didn't come here to ask you to erase it. I came because I don't want the rest of my life to look like that. I sat with that in silence for a minute, long enough to feel my own heartbeat slow down, and then I told her, look, I don't need your apology to keep living. I already did that work. But if you're part of this program, you start at the bottom like everyone else. No titles, no special treatment. You're going to take feedback from women you used to talk down to. You don't get to be in charge of the room anymore. If you can handle that, we'll walk with you. Her eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady when she said, I can. And I am sorry, even if you never say you forgive me. In that moment, forgiveness stopped feeling like letting her off the hook and started feeling like me putting down a weight I was tired of carrying. With time, Second Sunrise grew. Daniel's foundation helped us buy an old school building on the edge of town, and we turned it into a bigger center with classrooms, childcare, and a kitchen where no one gets yelled at for eating leftovers. We called it Horizon House. The day we pulled the sheet off the sign that said "Founded by Lena Carter," my son squeezed my hand so hard, my fingers went numb and whispered, "That's you." And for the first time, I actually believed him. On our first Christmas Eve, there we hosted a big community dinner, nothing fancy, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, discount pies. But the room was full of women who used to cry alone in bus seats and broom closets, now laughing, while their kids ran around under lights we paid for. After everyone left and the volunteers finished cleaning, I went back to my little office to grab my bag and found a small brown box on my desk, no name on the outside. Inside was a single cinnamon roll, a little crooked icing cracked, and a note in nervous handwriting. For Noah, from someone trying to do better. See, I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. I just felt this deep, tired kind of peace. I took the roll to the kitchen, put it in a glass jar, and labeled it Grace. Now, when a new woman walks in saying, "You don't know what I've done," we point to that jar and say, "You'd be surprised." So after all that, I honestly want to know what you think. When somebody who once had power over you comes back humbled and asks for help, do you ever really let them into the life you rebuilt? Or do you keep them outside and call it boundaries? And when a man like Daniel, who made his billions in a system that kept women like me invisible, uses that same money to fund places like Horizon House, is that redemption smart PR, or can it be a messy mix of both, you know what I mean? If you were in my shoes, would you have taken that supervisor job? Would you have approved Claudia's application? Would you have put your name on a building funded by a billionaire? Or would you have walked away on principle and tried to build it all alone? Drop a comment. Tell me if you think I did the right thing or completely lost my mind. Share your own stories about awful bosses, second chances, or little moments that flipped your whole life sideways. And if you've ever whispered something in the dark, convinced nobody heard you, I hope my story makes you wonder if maybe, just maybe, your whisper is the start of your own second sunrise.